From time to time I get asked questions like, how do I get that smooth camera glide on the intro of my videos? Or, what vintage lens adapters do I use? And so on. So I figured I'd put together a short video showing more or less how I shoot my videos and what gear I use in the process. This is purely my own setup. There are no hard and fast rules, and this is definitely not meant to be a how to grow your YouTube channel video, although I will put a few tips later in the video, most of which I completely ignore myself. I'll put some links in the description to some of the equipment I use, or at least the closest alternative I can find if the exact same product is no longer available. So I'll start off with lighting, and I'm mostly referring to indoor filming of something like a product review or demonstration for this bit. The sun is an awesome light source, and using the light from a window can be great, but depending on what and when you're filming, it can be a right pain if it's constantly dodging behind the clouds, because you'll spend most of your day adjusting the exposure. Not to mention if you want to work on into the evening, so I generally close the curtains and use some form of artificial light source, which allows me to continue filming regardless of the conditions outside. I have been known to use an old desk light, obviously adjusting the white balance to remove that horrible colour cast. And sometimes I'll light a smaller subject using a lume cube, or perhaps even a pair of them. But these days I mostly use a pair of relatively cheap Fossitan branded LED lights, which I got from Amazon. They came with fairly flimsy but usable lighting stands, a set of barn doors, and a diffuser panel, which I leave in place at all times. I opted for the set with external power supplies, but you can get batteries so you can run them away from power sockets. You can adjust the brightness and the colour temperature, and they're plenty good enough for the kind of stuff that I'm filming. For a demonstration or review video, I'll generally pick one light as my key light, placed at something like a 45-degree angle, but I'll adjust that position to suit the shot I'm filming. And then the second light goes on the other side, set slightly dimmer to reduce those hard shadows, and that's about it. If I'm shooting outdoors, I nearly always use a variable neutral density filter, like this Johnson one. That way I can use nice wide apertures whilst retaining my preferred shutter speed, and just use the neutral density filter to control the brightness. I use step-up rings like these to fit the same filter to whichever lens I'm using for that particular shoot, so I don't have to buy multiple sizes of filter. I don't have a permanent studio set up for filming, and I often work at a friend's house, so I tend to use a background to make it look like the whole video is filmed at the same time and in the same location. And we're not talking about some fancy photography background here. I use an old roller blind which was being thrown out because the end brackets were broken, so I grabbed it before it went in the bin. And I just rest it on whatever I have lurking around, in this case a pile of cardboard boxes full of stuff. If you've seen some of my other videos, you'll have worked out that I like using vintage lenses. In fact, most of my demo or review videos are filmed using these three. A 28mm Auto Chinon f2.8, which I use for most of the general shots. And then if I want to get in a bit closer, I usually reach for this 55mm Auto Chinon f1.4, which is one of my favourite lenses. And finally, for really close shots, I actually use a relatively new lens in the form of this Samyang 100mm f2.8 macro, which is really awesome for the money. I tend to shoot at f4 for general shots, which keeps enough in focus while allowing some nice blur in the background. Occasionally I'll push the boat out and go for f5.6, or if I want to go for something softer, I'll drop down to f2.8 or lower. But as always, none of this is set in stone. All of these lenses are manual focus, and personally I much prefer using manual focus for video. It can be very off-putting watching videos where the focus is constantly hunting around. with certain exceptions. Ave's videos wouldn't be nearly as funny if he didn't have the odd autofocus issue. You'll know what I mean if you've ever seen his videos. If I'm moving something into frame, like a camera for example, I'll set up the frame and focus on my subject, and then I'll put a little pencil mark so I can see where I need to place the item. And then I'll move the item out of shot and start filming, and hopefully I'll have a nice sharp shot when I place my item back in the frame. But it can take a little effort at times, and I often have to do multiple takes to get it just right. Of course, something I definitely recommend, possibly above anything else, is a tripod, or some other form of camera mounting system. You'll find plenty of videos where the shot is constantly swaying around all over the place and making you feel seasick. Anyhow, I have several tripods, but the one I mostly use is this Sirui ET2004 with an E20 ball head, which is really nicely made. The ball head has lovely smooth damping and the clamps all work as they should do, and I've been using it regularly for several years without any issues. This model has aluminium legs, which keeps the price down compared to carbon fibre. I'm not sure if they still make this model, so I'll put a link to the closest I can find available. Of course, just resting your camera on a pile of books could do the trick if you haven't got access to a tripod. Another thing worth considering is white balance. When I'm shooting still images, I sometimes leave the white balance in auto because I always shoot in RAW and I can easily correct it when I edit the shot later. But for videos, it's much better to set your white balance manually. As I found out in one of my early videos, every time I moved my hands into shot, the colour of the grey calculator I was filming would shift because the camera was compensating for the colour of my relatively pink skin. Also worth considering is changing your camera angle and the framing of your subject between clips. On some of my earlier videos, I more or less left the camera in one position, and it can get a bit boring after a while. It doesn't suit every subject, but cutting between a wide shot and a close-up to really get amongst the action, and then maybe a medium shot, can really add some impact to a video. You'll need a camera of some form or another. Personally, I prefer using a dedicated camera rather than a mobile phone, but plenty of people create awesome videos using phones, so there's nothing wrong with them. I use a pair of Panasonic Lumix GX80s, also sold as the GX85 in some countries. It's a bit of an older model now, so you should be able to pick one up relatively affordably second hand, or they still appear to be available new with a 12 to 32mm lens for around £400 or so. Having the pair of cameras is useful when I want to film a wide shot and a close-up simultaneously. Plus they use the same batteries, and of course the menu system is identical, so I don't have to think about that when swapping between cameras. And to attach my vintage lenses to the camera, I use a lens mount adapter. I've got several adapters for various of the common lens mounting systems, and some of the less common ones too. Some of the adapters are better than others. I bought a pair of cheap M42 to Micro Four Thirds adapters from eBay, and they're actually manufactured too long between flanges, so no matter what you do, you can't focus to infinity. Still, they'll make a nice paperweight. The best adapters I've found are the K&F concept ones. They seem to be better made than some of the cheaper ones, and they don't rattle around on the camera body. They're a little on the short side, so you do have to focus for infinity, but that's much better than being too long. If you stick to one mounting system, say M42 for instance, then you'll only need one adapter, which again can keep the cost down. But all of that aside, you can make videos just as well using whatever lens you already have, so there's no need to go out and buy loads of new gear. Probably the next thing to talk about is sound. It's easiest if you record your video and sound on the same device, in other words using the built-in microphone on your camera or phone. But usually that won't give you the best sound possible. On my earlier videos I used to use the camera's microphone, and at times the audio wasn't that good. It wasn't terrible, but it could definitely be improved. Some cameras allow you to attach an external microphone, so you can place the mic close to your mouth, making your voice sound better and picking up less background noise, but my GX80s are not one of those cameras. So to get better audio, I use this Tascam DR05X audio recorder, and depending on what sort of video I'm shooting, this cheap Synco lavalier microphone. The downside of recording your audio on a separate device is that you have to sync up your video and audio clips in your editing software. And if you're like me and use lots of short clips to make a finished video, then your editing time is increased considerably. And after all that, the audio in my videos is still not that great, but I try to strike a balance between getting the best audio ever and actually producing any videos at all. These days I mostly record a voiceover after the filming is finished, but this needs some planning before the filming commences, otherwise it will be difficult, if not impossible, to fit what I want to say to the clips I filmed. As such, I usually work to a rough script, so I know what to point to and when to point at it. I nearly forgot about those smooth camera glides that I use on many of my videos. For that I use a camera slider track thingy, like this Fossitan one. This is a fairly budget slider which cost around £30 at the time. There are longer ones, and also motor-driven ones, which are much more expensive. The advantage of the motor-driven slides is that I can be working in shot while the camera moves through the frame. Plus, the movement would probably be smoother than I can achieve doing it by hand. But it's still a brilliant tool to have, even without the motor drive. The slider has adjustable feet, so you can place it on a flattish surface, but I usually mount mine on a tripod and use it that way. You'll also need something to mount the camera on, unless you're keeping it dead level. I have a spare ball head with a quick release plate that I keep with the slider at all times. That covers most of the gear I use to shoot my videos. But what about building a successful YouTube channel? Well, you can probably tell from my subscriber count at the time I'm making this video that I probably don't qualify for talking about building a successful channel, but I can give you a few tips. These are generalisations and there will always be exceptions, but it seems to help if you stick to one subject, at least until you're established. Don't do as I do and produce videos about all sorts of obscure topics that the majority of people will have little or no interest in and are unlikely to stumble upon by accident. I have videos on my channel about vintage stationary engines, vintage camera lenses, obsolete dictation machines, old mechanical calculators, ASMR style videos where I'm doing carpentry, self-penned music videos, and so on. It's not a great format for building an audience. If we now take a look at TubeBuddy's Keyword Explorer, and I wouldn't pretend for 1 second to be an expert on using TubeBuddy, but I'll type in the sort of title that I'd feature on my channel. So I'll go for How to Use a Vintage Dictation Machine, and click Explore. And you can see that the competition rating is pretty good. No surprise there, not many people will be producing a video on that subject. But there's only 592,000 videos in the results, whatever that means, but that's a low score. And the overall score is 63 out of 100, and you can see that the search volume shown in the top bar is only rated as fair. This tells me that the likelihood of someone actually searching for my particular video is pretty low. So now let's try something that'll be a bit more popular. So I'll try How to Lose Weight. And again click Explore. Now this time the overall score is only 45 out of 100, but the search volume is excellent. The competition is only fair, but the number of videos in the search results is 90.6 million, and it's showing nearly 4 million monthly searches, so that looks quite promising. So if we refine our title a little bit more and add in 2022 and click Explore again, this time we've got an overall score of 75 out of 100. The search volume is good and the competition is very good. So clearly this is the video I should be making rather than another video about some obscure bit of vintage machinery. But I'm sure you can all guess which one I'm actually going to make. Another thing that appears to help is if you actually appear in your videos. Viewers are more likely to feel that they have some sort of connection with you if they can actually see you, and in turn they're more likely to return to your channel in the future. If, on the other hand, you're like me and you're all nervous and twitchy, with your eyes permanently darting in all directions, and you're always constantly fiddling with your face, then maybe it's best to stay behind the camera. And finally, fun, punchy and well-edited videos are generally going to have a wider appeal than someone spending an hour dismantling an old piece of machinery, commenting on the process as they go. Not that there's anything wrong with that, and you might learn a lot more from that kind of video, but it's unlikely to have the mass appeal of the shorter, fun, punchy video. Anyway, I think I've gone on for long enough in this video. Normal service will resume shortly, when I'll dismantle another bit of obscure old machinery or something. If you've enjoyed watching, please like the video and maybe even subscribe to the channel. That's it for now, so thanks for watching and I'll see you in a future video.